The famous Greek philosopher Aristotle once made a rather profound quote: "We are what we repeatedly do." When he said this quote, he was speaking in the field of habits, and what he was trying to say was that the quality of our habits, whether good or bad, affect us as a quality of a person. Unfortunately, this applies to addictions in real life, as addictions are still to be considered uncontrollable habits. And the effects of addiction affect your brain and your life are extremely drastic unless action is taken against the addiction. Now, I've always been interested in the human brain, and I have taken psychology courses over this school semester, and I've always asked myself, especially in the field of addiction, why do humans stay addicted to substances if it's bad for them? It's easier said than done to become unaddicted to them. In fact, we also have many illegal substances in our world like heroin, meth, cocaine, tobacco. Well, tobacco's not really illegal, but these substances are illegal and it causes people to be addicted, and addiction has unfortunately been on the rise in our time. Now, I'm going to speak about how addiction damages our brains first, and then I will move on to how it will damage our lives and the people around us. I would then speak about how addiction can lead us to death, and then I will speak about ways to prevent this addiction from affecting your brain or affecting your life. Now, we must first turn our attention to the way that our brain is damaged in this phenomenon. Now, addiction any substance can drastically change the way our reward system works. And our reward system in our brain releases a chemical known as dopamine, which is a sort of feel good hormone, which which causes us to feel good, and thanks to addiction, we often have to crave more of it to satisfy that need. It can damage the reward system of your brain as you're releasing too much dopamine onto your brain, which will damage other parts of your brain as well. In fact, it can especially addiction will damage the prefrontal cortex, which has commonly been associated with making decisions. If you Now, obviously, with this sort of information, we can assume that addiction can affect the way that we make decisions, and the decisions that we begin to make are start to be associated with trying to satisfy our cravings with the addiction. And along with this, a damaged brain can affect our body by giving us high levels of anxiety and stress levels. Now, since today's brain's purpose is to make decisions in life, and that addiction obviously affects the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which affects the way we make decisions, then we must assume that it affects our everyday life, which I will speak about next. Now, thanks to addiction, always having to get that hormone of dopamine in your body, you must always be constantly looking for more and stronger of a substance in order to satisfy your craving. This may end up us committing illegal actions, such as going to drug cartels, and we will end up committing crimes to satisfy these cravings, and we may potentially be arrested and put in jail. And we also may push the people in our lives away from us, as well as hurt them, because we are ashamed of what we do, or that we do not know what we're doing is wrong. Now, there's a saying in life that too much of anything will kill you. Now, this is especially true when it comes to addiction and on the way that addiction affects our brains to the point where we die. Now, we have an opioid crisis in our world, and this is especially prevalent among teens of our time, as opioids such as painkillers are very strong and they are extremely addictive. Due to needing more of these powerful opioids, this can often lead to death among teens, and a study shows that 518 out of every 100,000 teens will die from an opioid overdose. This will lead to many unnecessary fractures in the family because they noticed that their child was having this addiction. Well, the more that they didn't notice that their child was having addiction, and they feel like they could have prevented their death, and that the child that died will cause so much grief in the family. Now, if there's a way to do this damage, there must obviously be a way to undo this damage, and that's what I'm going to talk about next. Now, if you want to deal with your addiction, you gotta find a therapist to talk to and work with him in order to develop steps in order to avoid these sort of triggers that will trigger your addiction and your cravings. Along with this, if you are comfortable enough, you should probably talk to a friend or family member about these problems so that you can find support among your family and friends and your social community so that you can help overcome this. Along with this, it's I believe one of the most important things about addiction is to understand the risks behind the substances that are associated with addiction so that you can avoid them and not receive any damage to your brain in the first place. Now, please allow me to conclude this presentation as addiction can lead to brain damage, an unhealthy lifestyle, and can even lead to an early death. However, acting in a way to prevent these things from happening will help protect our brain and our social life. Unless this action is taken, however, addiction will destroy our brains and our lives, as well as lead us to an early death if we do not take any action. Now, it is extremely important for us that we control our lives in every possible way so that we can live them to the fullest. After all, life is short.